I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Low Carbon Lifestyle, where I talked about setting targets for your own emissions. In episode 2, we're going to look at a little trick that if all of us did it, we'd save significant emissions nationally. And as we get smarter homes over the next few years, that'll happen without us thinking about it. Hello, my name is Tom, and this is a little series about a low carbon lifestyle. Sometimes this whole sustainable living can feel well intimidating, whether it's thinking you need to buy an electric car or install solar panels on your roof. The majority of us can't do that overnight. We can't do that straight away. Or it looks like completely changing the way you live, living off the land or turning vegan overnight, both of which are fantastic things. But for this mini series, we're going to talk through how each of us can lower our emissions in everyday life and what that might look like. So episode 2, here we go. One of the ways that we can reduce our emissions is to shift when we use electricity. And this takes a little bit more complicated power engineering to understand, so bear with me. And if you're much more technically aware than I am, then please don't rip me apart. You see, the electrons in the electricity grid, they come from a load of different sources. Some come from big, beautiful nuclear power stations. Some come from coal and gas power stations. Some from diesel generators. Some from big hydroelectric dams or little hydroelectric dams like we've got in Durham. Some come from solar farms with bright, sunny, big electrons. Even more come from wind farms, some of them that are so far off the coast that you'll barely see them. So how do we decide which ones to use? Can we choose? And before you power engineering friends get too excited, this is my very simplified understanding. So at the moment in the UK, in 2020, nuclear power is basically always on. And that's a good thing. It's expensive to turn off, so we tend to use this first. We call it our base load, and it generates between 15 to 20% of our electricity all the time. So after we've got this base load, we head to the magic auction in the sky and we pick the cheapest fuel at that time. And because there isn't any fuel for solar or wind farms, these tend to be pretty cheap. We don't tend to switch them off unless we really have to. So whether that's for maintenance or if it's super windy, we stop the wind turbines rotating so they don't get damaged. And that leaves the last electrons to come from gas, which tends to be fairly cheap, and then coal, diesel, and oil, which tend to be a bit more expensive. And the nice thing is, and this is making some fairly big assumptions and ignoring a bit of the nuclear mess, that order of price tends to match how dirty in terms of carbon these generators are. So nuclear-ish, followed by wind, solar, gas, coal, and oil. So what does all that power engineering mean for us? Well, it means that every extra unit of electricity we use is always the dirtiest at that time. So what does that mean day to day? We tend to all use electricity at the same time. We are sheep or fish going downstream. We do everything at the same time. We get home from work, we put the kettle on, we warm the oven for dinner, we throw the washing in, we do all those things. Or there's an ad break on curry, or there's half time at the football. We put the kettle on, we make a brew, we do it all together. You get the idea. The way we operate en masse means that at certain times of the day, we use more electricity across the country. So if we can move our electrical use away from those certain times of day, away from those peaks, we can get cleaner electricity for free. How do we do that? So if you look at the curve for electrical demand on any given day, it tends to look a bit like this. It goes from quite low in the morning to a peak around midday, drops a tiny bit, and then peaks again between 4 and 7 o'clock. And this curve for demand also tends to almost match the carbon intensity of the electrical grid, as you can see here. So if we move our washing, our water boiling, our cooking, our laptop and phone charging, our TV watching, everything that uses electricity out of those peak times, out of midday and 4 and 7 p.m, then we can get a cleaner electricity supply. And if you can move it to when we have the lowest demand, which tends to be between midnight and 6 a.m, even better. And this is true like every day of the week, with a little caveat. That caveat being that sometimes when the demand is low, like at a weekend, the grid carbon intensity can be really low as well. So it can sometimes add up to wait to do your washing, for example, at the weekend. Some energy companies will even give you cheaper electricity outside of those peak times. Companies like Octopus.energy and their Agile tariff, which I've just gone on to, will give you different price for electricity every half hour for each day. Last weekend something amazing happened. Because of the reduced demand, because of the quarantine, and because it was a very sunny and windy day, there was kind of too much electricity being generated. And because some of the generators didn't want to turn off, some of them couldn't, some of them didn't want to turn off and on again because it'd be too expensive for them to cool down and warm back up again, the price of an electron electricity went negative. That's pretty extraordinary. So Octopus and some other snazzy, bigger energy suppliers, some of them that ask big demand to turn off and on when it can, started to pay people to use electricity during the day. That's amazing. So not only was your electricity lower carbon during those times, in reality, it was actually cheaper. Cheaper possibly for you, but cheaper for your energy provider. So in reality, how much would you get paid? At the peak of that payment from Octopus Energy, people were getting 3.31 pence per kilowatt hour. To put in some context, it takes about a minute to boil 1 cup of water. My kettle is a 2.5 kilowatt kettle. A minute boiling a 2.5 kilowatt kettle is about 42 watt hours of electricity. At 3.31 pence per kilowatt hour, that means that I would have got paid 0.14 pence to have a cup of tea. It's not a lot, but actually over the grand scheme of things, if you had all your energy consuming things, toaster, kettle, washing machine, laptops charging, electric vehicle charging, etc., then you could probably end up reducing your electricity bills by gaining some income at those peak times, but not a lot. And as I say, as our homes get smarter, as we can use smart plugs or our Internet of Things enabled fridges and washing machines and dishwashers and all this kind of stuff start to get enabled, we can actually control when we use electricity. And if we all get electric vehicles, we can actually control when we charge our electric vehicles. And if we had batteries, we can shift when our demand is to a different part of the day. This is a good thing. This can make the electricity we get cheaper, and it can reduce the emissions of our electrical grid. So that's it. Next time you put a wash on, next time you put the dishwasher on, next time you boil a kettle, next time you cook your dinner, have a think about when you do it. If you can push it back a couple of hours, do, and that will help us all reduce our emissions. Okay, that's it for episode 2. I hope I explained that okay. I hope that was interesting. And we'll come back for some more little tips with episode 3. Cheers.
Good girl, Ashley. Good girl.